Well, I have to say that I was astonished when I opened my news feeds this morning, Sunday morning. I'm recording this on Sunday morning, just about an hour and a half after the Remembrance Day commemorations at the Cenotaph in London have concluded. And I was astonished to see photographs of Harry and Meghan arriving at a James Bond themed birthday party for Kris Jenner and all the Kardashians at Jeff Bezos's $165 million mansion in Beverly Hills. I couldn't help thinking that if Harry and Meghan are being advised by anybody about how to manage their image, they are either not listening to that person, or they're not telling that person what they're planning to do, or that person is giving them very, very bad advice. If they thought that arriving via the public entrance at Jeff Bezos's disgustingly opulent billionaire hidey hole mansion for a Kardashian party was a good idea, considering what was going on back home at the time. This place that Harry told us earlier in the week that he has a great love for, that he misses, and that he very much identifies as a veteran, because it is Veterans Day weekend here. It is Remembrance weekend in the UK. On Saturday night, yesterday night, we saw Charles, Kate, and even young Prince George arriving at the Albert Hall for a festival of remembrance. It was an incredibly kind of moving event, quite sort of televisual in a way. It was perhaps more staged and a little more performative, like a sort of production. But I think what really struck people was Prince George being there, very much I think an acknowledgement by the royal family that a succession is coming, is upon us, that soon we will have not only a new king but a new Prince of Wales. And the other thing that was very striking was Charles really leaning into his vulnerability, looking at one stage close to tears as he sat in the box and pondered the incredible sacrifice of those people who gave their lives. Who is Harry listening to? That's what I want to know, because there he is arriving at a party of, a very divisive figure. Hardly Jeff Bezos is hardly kind of a unifying figure. There's a substantial body of thought that Harry himself was promoting just 2 weeks ago, saying the tech barons and the AI, which is something that Amazon very involved in, so it was arguably one of the first kind of AI kind of things. Harry was there 2 weeks ago saying how awful all the tech bros were, how they're trying to steal our minds, steal our attention. And then 2 weeks later, he's showing up at a party at Jeff Bezos's house, the same moment as his family are all like looking as dutiful as they possibly can, bringing their children forward as part of that duty. Then, of course, today, as people were starting, like me, to actually look at those photos, by the time they landed in the UK, Charles, William, Camilla, Kate, Edward, Sophie, all at the Cenotaph for that most somber of occasions, the official Remembrance Sunday celebrations, which the centerpiece of which is the 2-minute silence, the last post being played, echoing through Whitehall very, very hauntingly. And you just think, like, is this the same Harry who last week told us that he had to go on a tour of veterans organizations in Canada, drawing a lot of attention from his brother's Earthshot Prize, which may have been a added bonus for Harry. Is this the same Harry who was last week telling us that veterans were so important, that we had to keep the focus on veterans, that we had to remember that make sure that veterans weren't allowed to feel left behind? Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that nobody should go to a party between the 1st of November and the 11th of November. I went to a party myself last night, and I also noted that Harry is wearing a poppy and I'm not, and I apologise for that. But I'm not suggesting that nobody should ever go to a party, but I am suggesting that for somebody whose public image is who has made such a big deal of being allowed to celebrate Remembrance Day, of complaining at being excluded from Remembrance Day celebrations in the United Kingdom, of not being allowed to lay a wreath at the cenotaph and stuff, which we know is all stuff that has massively annoyed Harry and irritated Harry, because his argument is, look, I served on the front line. I am one of the very few people, along with Prince Andrew, to have seen active service. And look, I know there are lots of people who will argue that Harry did not see significant active service, but the fact of the matter is that he was a co-pilot gunner in an Apache helicopter. He did go to the front line, and as we know from his book, which he very foolishly, I think, told us that he killed 25 people. Well, be that as it may, he did serve in the front line. It's more than I've ever done, and I'm prepared to respect him for having done that. And I don't know what to say to people who argue that he didn't really serve in the front line. He did, and he has a right to mark Remembrance Sunday. But he also, I think, is massively misunderstanding the extent to which it is important to understand how the media works if you are going to be a media figure. You cannot afford to have photographs of yourself turning up at a party as your family, who you've had a massive go at in your books and in your television shows and accused of all kinds of dreadful things, are literally being the absolute epitome of duty at the same time. And like I was saying, look, I don't think that nobody should ever go to a party between the 1st and the 11th of November. You can make a very strong argument, and I would indeed make this argument, that part of what people fought and died for was for us to enable us to go about our own lives. And if that includes going to parties, great, fantastic, lucky you. But, at an event at Jeff Bezos's house, right, there is going to be an area for private arrivals. You can request private arrivals if you want. There will be a private entrance. Harry looked absolutely miserable running the gauntlet of the photographers anyway. He had a face like thunder. He's told us before that camera flashes give him a form of PTSD. And I'm just thinking, why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you doing this to yourself? And you can't help looking at Meghan next to him, grinning broadly at the camera flashes and thinking, is this actually Meghan's strategy? And I think it really gets to the heart of the whole problem that the Sussexes have, that Meghan's strategy, which seems to be maximum exposure, total embrace of social media. She's told us that her cooking show is moving to 2-minute clips, which sounds very much like TikTok or YouTube Shorts. It just clashes completely with Harry's stated goals and Harry's stated principles, which is privacy, which is, he does not like being in these situations. And they keep coming together and crashing against each other. And it's just becoming more and more unsustainable, in my opinion. I think that by turning up at a party on Saturday, the 8th of November, 2025, literally as the other side of your family are attending, worthy, but I'm sure not particularly great fun, like events in London at the Royal Albert Hall or at the Cenotaph, like literally doing that at the same time as they're doing that. The contrast that you're inviting is just absolutely, it's just so obvious to me. It just feels so obvious to me that this is not an intelligent thing to do. Of course, the pictures that were out in the Daily Mail today are going to contrast very unfavorably with what his brother, his father, and his sister-in-law were doing yesterday and today. I don't get it. I just think that they're absolutely crazy. And if you told me, 5 years ago that Meghan and Harry were doing all this so that they could be hanging out with the Kardashians on a Saturday night, I mean, I feel I feel like they're their own worst enemy as well, because they make it so easy for people to attack them and criticize them and say that, they're not sincere about all these things that they say, all these things that they argue. And it's the pictures. I think these pictures are actually going to be very damaging. Another picture that I thought was very interesting coming out of yesterday's engagement with the with Prince George attending the Festival of Remembrance at the Albert Hall. I did feel that the pictures were, I think they were important. Actually, I think yesterday night was a moment. I think you could argue that yesterday night was George's first proper royal engagement. When you've looked at him before going to things with his parents, he's always looked a bit like he's the kid. He's being brought along. He looks a bit like, he's just enjoying himself, quite unaware, quite unself-conscious. I felt that yesterday, this young man clearly understood the solemnity of the occasion. He understood his role within the occasion. He understood the role that he had to play within the whole tableau. His composure was very striking. He's been to royal events before. I'm not saying he hasn't been to royal events before, but there was just a very different tone. And I think that what is happening here is that we are being softened up for a new Prince of Wales. We are being introduced to the new Prince of Wales. We all know it's going to happen in the next couple of years. And it is extraordinary to think of the change that is happening and going to happen to the royal family in the next few years. We think a lot about King William V. We don't think so much about George, Prince of Wales, the new Prince of Wales, how young he's going to be coming into that role with the Duchy of Cornwall, of course, one of the most enormous property portfolios in the United Kingdom, going to be potentially in the hands of a minor. A very, very interesting turn of events. I just get the feeling with Charles missing COP30, with William speaking on his behalf, I think there is a bit of an acceptance now within the palace machine that it's okay. Charles can lean into his vulnerability. He was actually close to tears last night at one point, and I don't know if he's thinking about his own mortality or not, but he certainly there certainly was a poignancy to it all. There was a clear sense of this is the heir's heir. There was a clear sense of the line of succession, even though William wasn't there. He was on his flight back from Rio. Personally, I felt he should have been there. I thought he should have got back in time, but there we are. Look, Palisades say that George's appearance was long planned, that there's nothing special about it, that they're not, they'll try and play it down. But I think that is not what I felt. I felt that this was an acknowledgement of the succession, of what is happening, what we can see happening in front of our eyes. So the staging to me felt very deliberate. And I think that George did a brilliant job. I think that things have been explained to him. That is the impression that I get, that things have, the dynasty, the implications of what is happening with his grandfather's health have been explained to him. I think that they are managing it as well as they can. And as far as I'm concerned, I thought last night was a big moment.